focus on me. Are we focused? Autofocus says it's on. Okay, hey guys, what's up? It's Emily. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy you're here. I cannot believe that we are doing a wrap up for May and it is almost June. That is so wild to me. I feel like every video I make that's like a TBR video or a monthly wrap up video, I'm like, I cannot believe it is this month already. This year is going by so fast, but it literally is. So I have read 11 books this month. It's May 30th. I'm currently reading Wild Love by Elsie Silver. So I'll probably finish this in May, but include it in my June wrap up. So I'm going to say I read 12 books this month, which I think is a record for me. I think previously my highest was 11. So that's exciting. This month was like a pretty good month for me for reading. I did a 24-hour reading challenge, which always kind of gets me back into the swing of things. I think I read like 5 or 6 books in that challenge. And then I read 3 books out of the 6 books I picked in my TBR last month. And what I realized is that my TBR videos where I don't use the TBR jar, like when I pick my TBR in the beginning of the month, I tend to not be really inspired to read those books because they're chosen a little bit more randomly. The TBR jar prompts give me more of like a choice in what to read. And so naturally I kind of gravitate more towards like what I'm feeling that month for like that time of year, etc. Yeah, I only read 3 out of the 6 books from the Vanderpump Rules cast chooses my TBR video because that was like a random kind of number generator, really, when it all comes down to it. But I think all this to say the reason that I ended up reading more is because I didn't put pressure on myself to read the other 3 books. I feel like if I had, I would have gotten into a huge reading slump. So sometimes you do, at the end of the day, just need to read what you want to read. So the first book I read was Good Material by Dolly Alderton. This is my first Dolly Alderton book and I love this book. I love her writing. I gave it 4.5 stars. It's basically about this man, I believe he's in his 30s. It's written from his perspective. His girlfriend of like 3 years just broke up with him. And so he's really just trying to like basically figure out his life and what's going on. It's about societal expectations and kind of like getting in touch with what you really want. I don't want to give too much of it away, but the end portion of it, I really, really loved. Being stuck inside the head of a 35-year-old man with the emotional bandwidth of a teaspoon is truly the 7th circle of hell. I liked every single character in this book better than I liked Andy, who's the main character. This is one of those books, I think, where even if you don't like the main character, you will like the book because it is so smart and so clever and so funny. Dolly Alderton's writing is superb. I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. There were so many nuances in her writing that I really, really appreciated, and this month I'm going to be reading Everything I Know About Love, which is her first book. It's a memoir. Good Material is, I guess, like lip fic. A lot back. It's a lot back. Literary fiction. And then I also want to read her book Ghosts. So I'm on the Dolly Alderton train now, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, the next book I read is Play It As It Lays by Joan Didion. I was just reading some of the reviews on Goodreads for this as well, and actually there are just so many funny reviews on Goodreads like after you read a book that are, I don't know, I really enjoy finishing a book and then seeing everyone else's review. It's so fun. I love the first review is I did not enjoy this is from a 5-star review. I did not enjoy a single moment of reading this book, but I like it. I'm afraid because I have this end little life on my TBR this month, says somebody else. How do you describe this book? I mean, it takes place in the 60s, yeah, in Hollywood / the desert, and it's basically about this woman that like, I don't know how to describe it. She just like has a psychotic break, I guess. This book was written in 1970. There are so many good authors today. Joan Didion, they just don't make them like Joan Didion anymore. The way she writes is so beautiful and like so poetic. I've never read a book quite in this style or like this voice. Like she just has such a way with words. I don't know how else to describe it. I would definitely like not read this book similar to like A Little Life if you're depressed. It definitely, like, I didn't cry reading this book, but it puts you kind of in a mood. This is the kind of book I would actually save for like a sunny day on the beach. I wouldn't want to read this like inside when it's raining. Like I would need a contrast of my external environment. Anyway, I would say though, like if you are looking to kind of branch out a bit, maybe read some books that are a little older, read some like really good authors, and you haven't read Joan Didion, I would definitely start here. It is like, the thing about Joan Didion is like her books are actually quite short and like kind of easy to get through as a reader. As a person with emotions are a little hard. What I also like about this book and her style is that she doesn't really give a lot of exposition. Like, she doesn't really explain a lot. Like, there's some things you kind of like as a reader, you have to work to piece together. It kind of just like drops you into these chapters and these circumstances and doesn't give you like a ton of context, but the context is there. It's just not as like in your face obvious as I think more like contemporary writers are. So yeah, Play It As It Lays. What did I give it? Did I say what rating I gave it? I gave it 4.5. Also, this is like a classic like character study. We are wandering around the mental landscape of this woman who is unhinged, but also like so lost and depressed. I love books like that. I love character studies about people that are lost and dazed and confused. So that was the second book. The third book I read was Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson. This takes place in Brooklyn. It is more of a present day story and study on, I would say, the wealth gap. Anything about the wealth gap, I'm there. Let me read it. It bounces back and forth between three characters. So there's this woman from like more of a working class family, not poor by any means, but working class family who marries into this like very rich family. She ends up living in their family home with her husband on Pineapple Street. And then there's the other two sisters, her husband's two sisters. One is a mother, and then the other one, she works for a nonprofit. She's kind of like figuring it out. What I really like about this book is you have an impulse to judge the characters so much, like in the beginning. But I think as it unfolds, it just makes you think and it makes you understand people a little bit more. I know a lot of people, I think her name was Georgina, like the youngest sister. A lot of people like really hated her, but I really like her character arc. I gave it 4 stars and my review was, we love a good wealth gap character study. I did end up loving all of the characters in it, and I really love the writing style. And it also takes place like in Brooklyn. I live in Brooklyn, not in the area that it takes place in, but you know, it's a good New York City wealth gap character study, so I'm totally here for it. It says it's deliciously funny, sharply observed debut of family, love, and class. I would agree with that. This book seems like it was kind of polarizing. I think people either like hate it or love it, but the average rating is a 3.57. I personally, like, I'm an actor, I'm a filmmaker, like I love stories about characters. My first 3 books that I read this month were really character driven and not as much plot driven. And that's something that I really, as I say, enjoy just as a person. Like, I love just like living in a circumstance with tension and like seeing how a character kind of just like deals with that over a long period of time rather than having to like move a plot forward. Like, I really, really love character studies. So yeah, I would say these first 3 books are definitely character studies and I loved them all. If that's not your thing, then maybe skip them. Okay, the next book I read is a newer release, which is The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. This was the first book I finished in my 24-hour reading challenge, so I've talked about it a little bit on this channel. It's basically about this woman who comes home from this like night out. She's not married, she doesn't have a boyfriend, but she comes home and this man like comes down from the attic and he like claims to be her husband, and she's like very freaked out at first, but then she starts looking around and like things in her house are different. There's photographs of like her and this man, and she realizes like she's living in some like weird alternate reality right now where she's married. Then he goes back up the attic and then another man comes down the attic and then everything changes again. So she's living in this world where like she sends one husband up the attic and another one comes down, and she's like shuffling through husbands. Her life is changing, her circumstances are changing every time the husband goes up and down. Like, some husbands are really nice, some aren't. Some husbands have money, some don't have as much money. The different husbands equate kind of like different circumstances and different lives for this woman. And so I think it's such a unique idea for a story. I really appreciated that. The end was not like as satisfying as I wanted it to be. I did give it a 4 star. I really liked the idea. I thought it was very clever and I thought it was very funny at a lot of different parts. And there were actually like some parts where I got like nervous and like was kind of like on the edge of my seat. The rules of this world were so fun. So if you're looking for like a new release with kind of like a fresh new spin on storytelling, a fresh new spin on storytelling, fresh new spin on storytelling, quote Emily Keefe. Okay. I really liked all of the characters in it too. It was really well written. Again, really cute cover. Honestly, this month, I feel like I killed it on the covers. Having a cute cover just makes all the difference. I'm sorry. It does. Next, I read, which I think was Play It As It Lays, was the first book that I picked on my last TBR video. The second book that I picked on my last TBR video was The Comeback by Ella Berman. This I also read in my 24-hour reading challenge. The next few books were from that challenge because I'm going in the order of which I read them. So the next few books will be from that 24-hour reading challenge. So I've already kind of talked about these books on my channel, but for those of you who haven't seen it, this is The Comeback by Ella Berman. It's been on my shelf for so long, well over a year. I don't really know what took me so long to read it. This is also another kind of character study about this young actress living in LA. It kind of picks up a year after she disappears from the scene. Like I think she like left the Golden Globes and then disappeared and went to live with her parents in, what's the name of the spot? It starts with an A. It's where like Disneyland is in LA. I just forget the name of it. It's like an hour outside of Los Angeles. I love this book so much. I want to play this character so badly. Grace Turner, I think is the character's name. It opens up a year after she leaves. She ends up deciding to go back and kind of pick up relationships that she left and put the pieces back together. It's very like of the Me Too movement as well. It was a very, very satisfying book to read through to the end. I literally can't say enough great things about this book. My top character that I want to play is Nesta Archeron from A Court of Thorns and Roses, that series. My second one used to be Daisy Hates from the Magnolia Park series, but now I think it is actually, I think Grace Turner might come before Daisy Hates. I'm not quite sure, but she's definitely in the top 3. I just really loved this book. I loved the setting. I loved the circumstance. I'm an actor. I'm a filmmaker. So like living in that world, it's really about like the dark side of Hollywood. I love stuff about the dark side of Hollywood. Like I eat that up. Like that is my genre. So this was just literally like for me personally and my taste and what I'm looking for in a book, the perfect book for me. So again, I don't know what took me so long to read it. I also found myself laughing out loud. Like I feel like Ella Berman, such a good writer. She is British but has lived in LA, and so is the character. So she has like this like kind of commentary on LA from an outside eye that has also like spent a lot of time there, and I feel kind of connected to that in a way. So like her humor and critique on LA I just found really relatable and funny. This was a 5-star read for me. I fucking loved this book. Next, I read The Idea of You. So this was a movie that recently came out with Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galanzine. And my boyfriend, Jean-Luc McMurtry, is also in it for a hot second. So I started reading this book because I wanted to watch the movie. The book is very, very different from the movie. There are a lot of different circumstances that set up different dynamics. It's about this woman who is, I think, 39 or 40, and she has a daughter, and her husband recently left her for like a younger woman. She ends up having to go to this meet and greet for this boy band similar to like One Direction for her daughter. She ends up meeting the kind of equivalent of like Harry Styles, and they end up dating. In the movie, the daughter is older. She's like 17, 18. In the book, she's 12. That just creates like a different dynamic. I would say that the book more focuses on how hard it is and how something like this could never be possible. And I think the movie more focuses on the celebration of a woman dating a younger man, which I do think is like, we could just let that be like a fun thing. Like it doesn't need to be this like absolutely harrowing thing. They have very different endings. I think the book was great. I gave it 4 stars. The movie is also great. I love Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galanzine in that movie. The acting was so good. I think from a script point of view and like what each was trying to say, I tend to side actually with the screenplay, which is rare. The Idea of You, the book, was written a while ago, so I just like the idea of it being okay to celebrate this concept rather than like be like it's so hard like the whole time. Obviously, like in the movie there are problems and like conflicts and dynamics that the Anne Hathaway character comes up against, obviously, because it's still, you know, a compelling story. But I really enjoyed reading the book and watching the movie and kind of comparing the two because they were actually so different. I think the book was like better written, like it was like more involved and like had more like elements, but I liked what the movie was trying to say more than what the book was trying to say. I would definitely recommend reading the book and watching the movie and kind of keeping a lookout for the differences. It was just really fun for me personally. Okay, next I read Powerful, the little novella between Powerless and Reckless. Reckless comes out, I believe, in July. So this is a little spin-off for one of the characters, Adina, who is in the first book, Powerless. The series is kind of like The Hunger Games. It's definitely an easy read for a fantasy. Like if you're new to fantasy, it might be a fun place to start. This book was like nothing like that groundbreaking. Like I said in my 24-hour reading challenge, like, you know, there's something that happens in it that kind of just makes you like wonder like, well, what was the point of what I just read? Lauren Roberts, she's really great at writing banter between characters, specifically in more like romantic situations. And this was such a quick read, so fast. I laughed a lot when I read it. I was like, oh, like that kind of thing. So I definitely recommend the series. I gave it a 4, kind of like a reluctant 4 stars. I kind of wanted to give it a 3.5, but I was like, I feel like I would just give it a 3.5 because it's a novella. But it's like, for a novella, I would give it 4 stars. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense. It was good. Yeah, the end is a little like, okay, all right then. Like, well, fuck me, Next, I read Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. Last month, I read Just for the Summer, which was my first Abby Jimenez book. So I'm kind of reading this backwards. It's technically a trilogy, and it's Part of Your World, Yours Truly, and then Just for the Summer, but you can read them all as standalone books. I honestly don't even know what the connection was between Part of Your World and Just for the Summer. Call me crazy, probably not paying attention enough. I gave it 4 stars. So it's about this woman who comes from this family. These 2 parents were like world-renowned surgeons. They're like very famous and successful. She, I think recently, I don't know if they're divorced, but like separated from her husband. She's also very wealthy, obviously, because she comes from this powerful family of like surgeons. But she ends up falling in love with this like guy in a small town who is like 6 or 7 years younger than her. Oh, he's like the mayor of this small town. I think he like has like some sort of shop or something, if I'm remembering this correctly. I don't know. But the point is that like he doesn't come from that much money. He's just like a 28-year-old in like a small town, and they fall in love. Can they fit into each other's worlds? Like, can they be together when their worlds are actually like so different? Is kind of the vibe. But yeah, it was a great book. I gave it 4 stars. I think Abby Jimenez is a great writer, and I'm looking forward to reading Yours Truly, and I think there's like one other one too I want to read. Then I read Before We Were Innocent, which is Ella Berman's other book. She's written 2 books. This is her other book. It's like kind of a murder mystery, but also kind of a character study, because it's not written in like a traditional like murder mystery way. I didn't get the sense reading it that I was like, oh, I need to like figure out what happens. I mean, I did, but like not in the typical way that I usually feel, because it goes back and forth between these 2 time periods. These 3 friends go on this trip to Greece 10 years ago, and one of them ends up getting murdered or dying. And then it picks up 10 years later, where it's from the point of view of one of the friends that survives, and the other friend that also survives kind of comes back into her life. The friend that comes back into the other friend's life, she ended up really like capitalizing on what happened. Both of these girls kind of went through this highly publicized trial and like murder that happened to their friend, and then the one friend kind of goes off after and like starts this podcast, and I think she like writes some books or whatever, and she becomes like really famous, like makes a lot of money off of the death of their friend. And then the other girl, who is the narrator of the book, kind of just retreats inward. It goes back and forth between like alternate time periods between the actual trip with the friend that died, so you get to know the friend that died, and then the present time with kind of them dealing with where they are now. And I guess you do get answers. I think people wanted a little bit more from the end of the book. I feel like I got what I needed, because I was really looking at this more of this will be a character study. For that, I was fulfilled. I would really recommend it. I love Ella Berman. I think she's a great writer. I love these like young women, complex women characters that she writes. I love her writing style. I love how she writes women. This one I gave 4 stars. Then I finally read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This was wild. This was wild. This is basically, how do I describe this? It's about this woman who has this like older husband, and I guess she's kind of like bored with her life. It opens where they're at this bar for her birthday, and she sees this like other beautiful woman come in, and she has this like hot husband, whatever. And it turns out it's this woman's birthday too, and then they like meet in the bathroom, and they're like, you're my birthday twin. Like, they were literally born the same exact day, I think in the same hospital. The other woman is like a podcaster, like a famous podcaster who interviews, I don't know, women who have kind of like turned their life around. And so this woman, the one with like the older husband, basically like pitches her birthday twin this idea of like, what if you did a podcast like, I am about to turn my life around, but I haven't yet. I think it will level up your podcast. Like, please just give me a chance. They start this podcast and things start unfolding. I think you know from the beginning that 2 people do end up dead. And then you kind of have to figure out who it is and why it happened and like what is the truth. You get a lot of different perspectives from this book. I think at the end you kind of have to make the decision of like, it's really crazy. Like I'm still honestly like not sure what I think. Honestly, I gave this 3 stars. I thought it was really well written. I like the concept. I just didn't feel like incredibly connected to the story or the characters. Anytime I was like, oh, I could read right now, I wasn't like super inspired to pick this up. I don't know. I feel like that's always a good gauge for me for my ratings. A lot of people loved this book, so I would definitely recommend it still, even though I gave it 3 stars. 3 stars isn't like a horrible rating. It's just like, oh, like that was good, you know. It was a Book of the Year finalist last year for Book of the Month, so I'm glad I read it. And then the last book I read before Wild Love, which will actually probably be my last book of May, was Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister, which was the 3rd book from my TBR video from last month that I ended up reading. So this is by Gregory Maguire, who wrote Wicked, which is the book that the musical and upcoming movie were based off of. Wicked is like the untold story of the Witches of Oz. It's kind of like villain origin story. So this is kind of like the untold story of one of the stepsisters. I mean, I guess it's both of them, but it's really about this one, Iris. I wish I read this, like, honestly, in the fall, but I didn't. I read it in May. I gave it 3 stars. Like, I think it's honestly like the time of year that I read it. I feel like if I read it in the autumn, I'd probably be a little bit more into it. He is really clever, Gregory Maguire, with his like retellings and reimaginings of these characters. I hear that this book, because there's this book, there's Wicked, and then there's the book Mirror Mirror about, I guess, the Evil Queen, which the Evil Queen is one of my favorite characters, so I might just read that. But I hear that this one is the best book. I would save it for October. It's not a summer read. I did enjoy parts of it. It's like it has, you know, themes of beauty. What is beauty? Why is beauty important? What is beauty? What is art? All that stuff. Confessions of an Ugly Stepsister. Those are the 11 and a half books I read in May. It was overall really good reading month. There were definitely a lot of character studies, which, as I've mentioned, I really love. You know, had 1 or 2 books I wasn't like absolutely crazy about, but overall it was a really, really good month, and I really enjoyed everything that I read. If you've read any of these books, feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This was a good reading month. I enjoyed myself. So that's it. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Happy Friday, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.